The cold in the room did not come from the air conditioner alone. It came from silence. It came from control. It came from a man who believed the world bent to his will. Alina sat straight in a leather chair that felt too large for her. The chair was soft, but she felt tense. Her hands rested in her lap. They were calm on the surface, yet her fingers pressed together as if holding something fragile. She wore a simple gray sweater and old blue jeans. The fabric had faded with time. She had owned them long before this building, before this marriage, before everything fell apart. The office stretched wide around her. Glass walls showed the city far below. Tall buildings stood like silent witnesses. The floor shined so much it reflected light into her eyes. She blinked once, then focused forward. Across the table sat Marcus Sterling. He leaned back in his chair with ease. His suit was dark and sharp, not a wrinkle touched it. A heavy gold watch rested on his wrist. He checked it again, then again. "Well," Marcus said, his voice was sharp and impatient. "Are you going to sign, or should I cancel my afternoon?" Alina did not answer at once. Her eyes stayed on the papers in front of her. The stack was thick. The title printed on top felt heavier than the pages beneath it. It marked the end of 3 years of marriage. Marcus let out a laugh. He turned his head slightly. "Arthur," he said, "tell her this is not complicated." Arthur Pendleton stood beside him. He wore a dark suit and polished shoes. His face showed calm, trained neutrality. He pushed the documents toward Alina. "Mrs. Sterling," Arthur said evenly, "this agreement ends the marriage. You will not receive spousal support. You will not receive property. You will not receive company shares. Mr. Sterling keeps all business and personal assets. In exchange, he takes shared credit responsibility." Marcus smirked. "She barely spent anything anyway," he said. "She never understood money." Alina felt a small tightness in her chest. She stayed quiet. "I only want my last name back," she said at last. Marcus laughed loudly. "Vance," he said, "that name sounds like dirt." He shook his head. "It fits." Arthur cleared his throat. "Please sign on the marked lines," he said. Alina picked up the pen she had brought from home. It was cheap. It worked well enough. Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You should be grateful," he said. "I gave you a life you never earned. You were lucky I noticed you at all." Her hand paused. The room felt smaller. She thought of her father, of the phone call Marcus ignored, of the silence after. "How is your father?" Marcus added with a smirk. "Still working in gardens." Her jaw tightened. She signed the first page. "His name was Silas Vance," she said quietly. Marcus waved his hand. "Doesn't matter. Save me the cost of sympathy." She signed again. The sound of pen on paper echoed in her ears. Page after page, signature after signature. Arthur collected the documents. Marcus snatched them and flipped through quickly. A wide grin spread across his face. "Done," Marcus said finally. He stood. "File these immediately," he said to Arthur. "I want this finished today." He turned back to Alina. "You are free now," he said. "Go learn how the real world works." Alina stood. She adjusted her sweater. She walked toward the door. "Careful," she said softly without turning around. "The fall hurts more than the climb." Marcus laughed. "Get out." The door closed behind her. 2 hours later, Marcus sat in a bright restaurant downtown. Crystal glasses lined the table. Soft music floated through the air. The smell of expensive food filled the room. Jessica sat across from him. Her dress was red and smooth. Her smile sparkled. "To freedom," she said. Marcus lifted his glass. "She didn't fight. She signed and left." Jessica laughed. "Of course she did." He took a drink. "The merger will save everything," Marcus said. "Omni Group wants image, power. They respect couples like us." Jessica leaned closer. "There is more good news," Marcus added. "The land issue is solved. The owner died last week." Jessica paused. "Lucky timing." "It was some trust," Marcus said. "Vance Trust." What? Jessica frowned slightly. "That name." Marcus waved her off. "Common name, nothing special." His phone buzzed. He answered with a sigh. Arthur's voice sounded strained. "Marcus," Arthur said. "We received a court summons." Marcus rolled his eyes. "For what?" "Probate court," Arthur replied. "Tomorrow morning." Marcus sat up. "Alina must attend." Marcus froze. "Why?" he demanded. "I don't know," Arthur said, "but Judge Harrison is presiding." What? Marcus felt something cold twist in his stomach. He ended the call. Jessica touched his arm. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Paperwork," Marcus said, forcing a smile. Outside, rain dotted the sidewalk. Alina stood at a bus stop across the street. She watched the restaurant window. She held a cream-colored envelope in her hands. Gold letters shone softly. "Vance Trust." She folded it carefully. She stepped onto the bus. Tomorrow would change everything. Marcus had no idea. The rain fell hard the next morning. It painted the city gray. The sky looked heavy, like it was holding its breath. Marcus stepped out of his car in front of the courthouse. His shoes splashed in shallow water. He frowned at the stain on the leather. He hated small problems. They reminded him that control was an illusion. Arthur walked beside him holding a folder tight against his chest. He looked nervous. His tie sat crooked though he had fixed it twice already. "This is unnecessary," Marcus said. "All this for a land lease." Arthur did not answer. He pushed the courthouse door open. Inside, the building smelled of stone and old paper. The ceiling rose high above them. Every sound echoed. Every step felt louder than it should. Marcus scanned the hallway. "Where is she?" he asked. "She will be here," Arthur replied. "She must attend." Marcus scoffed. "She always followed rules. Even when they hurt her." The courtroom doors opened. People filed inside. They did not look like usual visitors. They wore expensive suits. Their faces were serious. Marcus recognized several of them: bank leaders, developers. "Executives, what is this?" Marcus whispered. "Why are they here?" Arthur swallowed hard. "I don't know." Marcus stepped inside. He stopped. Alina was already there. She sat at the front table, not the teachable table, the other one. The plaintiff's table. She wore black, not plain black, clean black. Her dress fit her perfectly. Her hair fell freely over her shoulders. She sat straight, calm, composed. Marcus felt heat rise in his chest. "What is she doing there?" he hissed. Arthur stared at the floor. The judge entered. The room rose. Judge Harrison was older. His eyes were sharp. His face showed no warmth. "Be seated," he said. The room settled. "We are here today," the judge began, "to execute the final will of Silas Vance." Marcus let out a small laugh. "A gardener's will," he muttered. The judge looked up. "Mr. Sterling," he said calmly, "do you find this amusing?" Marcus straightened. "My apologies," he said. "I'm confused. I am here for a land matter." "You are," the judge replied, "and so is Ms. Vance." Alina stood. "I never spoke about my father's work," she said clearly. "My husband never asked." Marcus frowned. The judge opened the document. "I, Silas Vance," he read, "leave my entire estate to my daughter, Alina Vance." The room stayed silent. "The Vance Trust includes the following assets," the judge continued: multiple agricultural companies, commercial properties, and majority shares in Omni Group. Marcus felt his breath stop. Omni Group, the judge continued, including ownership of the land at 555 Fifth Avenue. Marcus's heart slammed hard. That was his building. "The lease expired yesterday," the judge said. "The land now belongs to Ms. Vance." Marcus stood up. "That's impossible," he said. "I own that tower." "You lease it," the judge corrected. "And the lease was not renewed." The judge turned to Alina. "What is your decision?" he asked. The room went quiet. Marcus looked at her. His confidence cracked. "Alina," he said quickly, "we can talk, we can negotiate." She stood slowly. "This is not about money," she said. "My father waited to see who you were." She looked at Marcus. "You failed." She turned to the judge. "I decline the renewal," she said. "I request eviction." Marcus shouted, "You'll ruin me." "What? You did that yourself," she replied. The gavel struck. Court adjourned. Marcus stood frozen. The world had shifted, and it was only beginning. The sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom. It did not sound loud, but it felt final. Like a door closing somewhere deep inside Marcus. People began to move. Chairs scraped softly on the floor. Low voices filled the room. Whispers spread like smoke. Marcus stayed still. His hands rested on the table, but they trembled. His mind struggled to keep up with what had just happened. The land, the building, the lease, Alina. None of it made sense to him. It was not how the world worked, not his world. Arthur leaned toward him. His face was pale. "We need to leave," Arthur said quietly. Marcus did not answer. His eyes were fixed on Alina. She was speaking with the judge now. Her voice was calm, respectful, strong. Marcus had never heard her sound like that. He stood suddenly. His chair fell backward with a loud crash. Several heads turned. "Alina," he said, his voice cracked. "Wait." She turned slowly. For a moment the room disappeared. It was just the two of them again, like before, but everything had changed. "You can't do this," Marcus said. "There are thousands of employees, families, you can't just throw them out." Alina looked at him. Her eyes were steady. "I gave 30 days, she said. "That is more than fair." Arthur touched Marcus's arm. "Please," he whispered, "not here." Marcus shook him off. "We were married," Marcus said louder now. "That has to mean something." Alina's face did not change, but her shoulders lifted slightly, then fell. "It meant something to me," she said. "You ended that." The judge cleared his throat. "Mr. Sterling," he said, "you will follow the ruling. Any disruption will result in contempt." Marcus swallowed hard. Alina turned away. She gathered her folder. She walked toward the exit. Marcus watched her leave. The sound of her steps faded. Something inside him broke. Outside the courthouse the rain had slowed, but the air felt heavy. Reporters waited near the steps. Cameras lifted the moment Marcus appeared. "Mr. Sterling," someone shouted, "is it true you lost the building?" Marcus pushed forward. Arthur followed, trying to block the cameras. "No comment," Arthur said sharply. Marcus spotted Jessica near the entrance. She stood apart from the crowd. Her phone was in her hand. Her face was unreadable. He rushed toward her. Jessica, he said, we need to leave now. She looked at him slowly. What happened? She asked. It's temporary, Marcus said quickly. A misunderstanding will fix it. What? Jessica tilted her head. Fix what? The lace, he said, the building, everything. She stared at him for a long moment, then she stepped back. You lost, didn't you? She asked. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded once. Her lips pressed together. I didn't sign up for this, she said. It's just a setback, Marcus insisted. I still have money, connections. Jessica laughed. It was short, cold. You have nothing without that building, she said. And now everyone knows it. She turned and walked away. Marcus stood there stunned. Arthur returned. His voice was tight. The board wants a meeting, he said. Immediately. The boardroom felt different now. The air was tense. The long table seemed colder. Marcus sat at the head. The screen lit up with faces, men and women he once controlled. This is a temporary issue, Marcus said. We can recover. Silence followed. Finally, the chairman spoke. You were reckless, he said. You hid risk. You ignored warnings. I built this company, Marcus snapped. And you just destroyed it, another voice replied. They voted quickly, cleanly. Marcus was removed as CEO. The screen went black. No goodbyes. Marcus stared at the empty room. His phone buzzed, a message from the bank. Access denied, another message, account frozen. His breathing grew fast. He tried another app, access denied. Then a text appeared from Jessica. You should have changed your passwords. His chest tightened. He screamed. The sound bounced off the walls. The days that followed blurred together. News vans parked outside the building. Employees packed boxes. Security avoided his eyes. Marcus walked the halls like a ghost. On the 15th day, he saw his assistant packing a coffee machine. That stays, Marcus said. The assistant looked at him. I quit, he said calmly. And I bought this. He walked away. Marcus stood alone. On the final day, the lights went out. The elevators stopped. The building was silent. Marcus sat on a folding chair in his empty office. Rain hit the windows. The door opened. Alina entered. She wore a hard hat. She held blueprints. This wall comes down, she said to someone behind her. She saw Marcus. You need to leave, she said. I have nowhere to go, Marcus whispered. She looked at him, not with anger, not with joy, with distance. You wanted freedom, she said. Now you have it. The guard stepped forward. Marcus was escorted out. In the lobby, workers removed his logo. A tree was being placed where his statue once stood. The fall did not end when Marcus left the building. It only changed shape. After the guards pushed him out into the rain, the city did not stop for him. Cars passed, people walked by, no one looked twice. He stood on the sidewalk, soaked and shaking, staring at the glass tower that no longer belonged to him. The name Sterling had already been removed from the front. Workers moved inside like ants, tearing down walls and signs. Marcus felt something empty open inside his chest. It was not sadness, it was shock. He had lived his whole life believing the ground beneath him was solid. Now it was gone. That night, Marcus did not return to a penthouse. He slept on a couch in a short-term rental he barely remembered booking. The room smelled like cleaning spray and old carpet. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His phone sat beside him silent, no messages, no calls. The people who once needed him had disappeared. The silence felt loud. It pressed on his ears. He poured himself a drink from a cheap bottle he found in the kitchen. The taste burned, but he welcomed it. It reminded him he was still real. The next morning brought no relief. His phone buzzed, but not with help. It was news alerts. Headlines filled the screen. Sterling Empire collapses. CEO removed after court loss. Vance Trust takes control. Marcus turned the phone face down. His hands shook. He tried to call Arthur, no answer. He tried again, straight to voicemail. The lawyer who once followed his every command was gone too. Within 2 days, the board made everything official. Marcus received the notice by email, cold language, legal words. He was stripped of his title. His access to company accounts was revoked. A full audit was ordered. Security was instructed not to allow him into any company property. The email ended with a short sentence thanking him for his past service. Marcus laughed when he read it. The sound came out broken and sharp. Past service. As if he were already dead. He tried to regain control the only way he knew how. He called banks. He called investors. He called old contacts who owed him favors. One by one, the calls failed. Some did not answer. Others answered politely and ended the call quickly. A few were honest. They said his name was toxic. They said no one wanted to be seen helping him. Marcus began to understand something he never had before. His power was never his. It belonged to the money, the building, the title. Without those, he was invisible. Jessica sent one final message. It arrived late at night. It was short. She told him she had moved the offshore funds into accounts he could not reach. She thanked him for the lifestyle lessons and wished him luck. Marcus read the message twice. Then he threw his phone against the wall. It shattered. He sank to the floor and pressed his hands to his face. For the first time in years, he cried. Not quietly, not with dignity. He cried like someone who had lost everything and never learned how to ask for help. The weeks passed quickly and painfully. Investigators arrived, questions followed, documents were requested. Accounts were frozen. Marcus spent hours answering emails, trying to explain decisions he once made without thought. The confidence that once filled his voice was gone. Each day stripped him further. Friends stopped calling. Invitations vanished. Even his name seemed to lose meaning. When the eviction from the tower became public, the media treated it like entertainment. Cameras followed him when he went outside. They captured his tired face, his wrinkled clothes, his shaking hands. He hated them, but deeper than hate was fear. He did not know where he would land. He did not know who he was without the image he built. By the end of the month, Marcus had no home in New York. Properties were seized to cover debts. Accounts showed zero balances. He packed what little he could into 2 suitcases. He left the city at night, avoiding cameras. He took a cheap flight south. Florida was warm and anonymous. He rented a room in a small motel near the highway. The sign flickered outside his window. The bed creaked when he moved. It was nothing like the life he once lived. Days in Florida blurred together. Marcus tried to rebuild using old habits. He looked for fast money, easy deals. He found brochures for cheap land and convinced himself he could sell dreams again. He told himself this was temporary. He told himself he was smarter than the people around him, but deep down he knew he was lying. The confidence no longer felt real. It felt borrowed and thin. One evening, as he sat in the motel room with the television on low volume, a news segment caught his attention. He turned up the sound. The screen showed the building on Fifth Avenue, but it looked different. Green plants climbed the walls. Light poured through open spaces. The name had changed. The Silas Vance Center for Sustainability. The reporter spoke about innovation, community, and growth. Then the camera showed Alina. Marcus froze. She stepped out of a car, calm and steady. She smiled as she spoke to reporters. She looked alive in a way he had never been. The reporter asked about success. Alina spoke about patience, about soil, about caring for foundations. Marcus felt a tight pain in his chest. He reached for the remote and turned off the television. The room fell silent. He sat there, staring at the blank screen, finally understanding something he had avoided his entire life. He had mistaken control for strength. He had mistaken speed for progress. And he had mistaken Alina's quiet nature for weakness. The knock on the door came later that night. It was firm and loud. Marcus stood slowly, his heart racing. When he opened the door, officers stood outside. Behind them was a man in a plain suit. He introduced himself calmly, Fraud Division. The words felt heavy. Marcus did not resist. He did not argue, he was tired. As the cuffs closed around his wrists, he felt something strange, relief. The chase was over. The fall had reached the ground. While Marcus was driven away under flashing lights, life continued elsewhere. In New York, the building thrived. Alina walked through open halls filled with light and plants. Scientists worked where executives once argued. The air smelled clean. The space felt alive. Alina stood at the center of it all, calm and focused. She did not think of Marcus often. When she did, it was without anger, only understanding. That night, Alina stood on the rooftop garden. The city lights stretched below her. She breathed deeply. For the first time in years, her shoulders felt light. The ground beneath her felt real. And she knew the hardest part was over. But the story was not finished yet. The months after Marcus Sterling's arrest moved slowly for him, but quickly for the world that had already forgotten his name. Time inside the holding facility felt thick and heavy, like air that refused to move. Days blended into each other. Marcus sat in a narrow room with pale walls and a small window that showed only a slice of sky. He replayed the past again and again in his mind. Every sharp word, every moment of pride. Every time he had looked at Alina and seen nothing of value. Now, with nothing left to distract him, the memories pressed in without mercy. The legal process drained what little strength he had left. Meetings with lawyers were short and cold. They spoke in careful sentences, explaining charges and consequences. Wire fraud, false representation, financial misconduct. Marcus listened but felt distant, as if they were describing another man. He signed papers with shaking hands, the same way Alina had once signed divorce documents across from him. The thought made his stomach twist. For the first time, he wondered if this was how she had felt. Small, cornered, unseen. Eventually, Marcus accepted a deal that spared him years of prison but stripped him of any remaining illusions. He would serve time. He would pay fines he could never fully repay. He would leave the system with nothing but his name, and even that name no longer carried weight. When the judge spoke his sentence, Marcus did not argue. He stared straight ahead. The sound of the gavel no longer shocked him. It felt familiar now, like punctuation at the end of a long sentence he had written himself. Life inside prison was quiet in a harsh way. The noise never stopped, but nothing mattered. Marcus learned routines: wake up, stand in line, eat. Sit, sleep, he was no longer special. No one cared who he used to be. At first, that angered him. Later, it exhausted him. Without an audience, his ego had nowhere to perform. Slowly, painfully, something else took its place: awareness. He began to notice small things: the sound of footsteps, the weight of silence, the cost of arrogance. Meanwhile, Alina's life moved in the opposite direction. The Silas Vance Center for Sustainability became a symbol of change. People spoke about it with respect, schools visited, experts studied it. The building no longer felt like a monument to power, it felt like a living place. Alina walked its halls often, listening more than she spoke. She learned names. She learned stories, she made choices carefully. Each decision felt rooted, not rushed. The Omni Group thrived under her leadership. The board trusted her instincts. She did not lead with fear, she led with patience. Profits rose, but so did morale. Programs expanded. Farmers received support. Communities grew stronger. Alina often thought of her father during quiet moments. She remembered his hands, rough from work, steady in motion. She remembered his lessons. They guided her more than any business book ever could. At home, life felt full in ways Alina had never known before. Her son grew quickly, his laughter filled rooms. He asked endless questions about trees, dirt, and machines. Alina answered each one with care. Julian stood beside her through it all. He did not try to lead. He did not try to shine. He simply stayed. That steadiness felt like a gift. Together, they built a life that felt honest. A life that did not need to impress anyone. Years passed. Marcus aged faster than he expected. Prison did that to people. His hair thinned. His posture curved. His voice lost its sharp edge. He worked small jobs inside. He kept his head down. At night, he lay on his bunk and thought about the orchard Alina once described. He imagined rows of trees. He imagined roots. He wondered how a man who owned so much could end up with so little. The answer always came back the same. He had never respected what he stood on. One afternoon, Marcus caught a glimpse of the news on a shared television. The image was brief but enough. Alina stood at a podium. She spoke about sustainability and long-term vision. Applause filled the room on the screen. Marcus felt something warm and painful rise in his chest: pride, regret, acceptance. He did not smash the screen this time. He simply watched until the image changed. When Marcus was finally released, the world felt overwhelming. He stepped outside carrying a small bag. The sun felt too bright. The air felt too open. He had nowhere to go. No one waited for him. He took a bus, then another. He ended up in a small town where no one recognized him. He rented a room. He found simple work. It was honest work, hard on the body, quiet on the mind. At night, he slept deeply. Dreams no longer haunted him. They simply reminded him of what was. Alina never sought updates on Marcus. When she heard bits of information through distant channels, she acknowledged them and moved on. Her focus stayed forward, on growth, on care, on legacy. She taught her son the value of patience. She showed him how to plant seeds and wait. She told him stories about his grandfather, about respect, about kindness, about the ground beneath their feet. One autumn morning, Alina stood in the orchard with her son. Leaves fell around them. The air smelled sweet and sharp. She watched him run between trees, laughing. In that moment, she felt complete. Not because she had won, not because Marcus had lost, but because she had chosen differently. She had chosen depth over height, roots over towers. Far away, Marcus walked home from work as the sun set. He passed a small garden behind a house. Someone had planted tomatoes. The soil looked rich and dark. He paused. For a moment, he knelt and touched the ground. It felt solid, real. He stood again and continued walking, carrying with him a quiet understanding that had come too late but had finally arrived. The world kept turning. Seasons changed. Towers stood and fell. Gardens grew. And somewhere between loss and growth, the balance returned. But just as Alina believed the hardest part was behind her, a letter arrived on her desk that made her pause, reminding her that even healed ground can still be tested. The letter arrived on a quiet morning, slipped neatly onto Alina's desk among reports and proposals. At first it looked ordinary: cream paper, clean print, official tone, but something about it made her pause before opening it. She had learned to trust that feeling. It was the same feeling she had the day Marcus laughed while signing the divorce papers. A soft warning, steady and calm. She opened the envelope slowly and read in silence. The letter was not hostile. It was not dramatic. It was careful and polite, written in legal language. It informed her that a long-dormant claim tied to an old subsidiary of Sterling Enterprises had resurfaced. The claim involved environmental damage from decades earlier, before Alina's leadership, before the transformation of the building. Because the land and several assets now belonged to the Vance Trust, the responsibility was being reviewed. It was not an accusation, it was a notice. Still, it carried weight. Alina leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes for a moment. She did not feel panic, she felt responsibility. This was the cost of ownership. Not just the benefits, but the past. She called her legal team and scheduled a meeting. She did not rush, she never rushed, she asked for facts, she asked for timelines. She asked who had been harmed and how it could be repaired. Her focus stayed on solutions, not blame. As the review began, Alina spent long hours reading old records. Files from Sterling Enterprises told a story of shortcuts and ignored warnings, decisions made for speed, not care. She felt anger rise once, then settle. Anger would not help, action would. She approved funds for cleanup before the courts demanded it. She contacted affected communities directly, she listened. Some people were suspicious, others were surprised. A few cried when they realized someone was finally taking responsibility. News outlets picked up the story, some praised her response, others questioned her motives. Alina accepted both, she understood public doubt, trust took time. She stood in front of cameras and spoke plainly. She did not hide behind statements, she did not shift blame, she acknowledged the harm and explained the steps being taken. Her voice stayed steady, her eyes stayed open. People noticed. During this time, Alina's personal life remained grounded. She woke early. She helped her son get ready for school. She walked him to the bus when she could. She shared meals with Julian in the evenings, often simple food grown on the estate. They talked about the day, about plans, about nothing at all. Those quiet moments kept her centered. They reminded her why the work mattered. Marcus, meanwhile, lived a much smaller life. After his release, he had settled into routine. He worked maintenance at a warehouse. The job paid little, but it was steady. His hands were rough again, though not from dirt, from lifting, from fixing, from showing up. People there did not know his past. They judged him by his actions now. He kept his head down and did his work. Some nights he was bone-tired. Other nights he sat alone and thought. He had learned to live with regret without letting it consume him. That was not easy. Regret came in waves. Sometimes it hit when he saw a glass building reflecting the sunset. Sometimes when he passed a garden. Sometimes when he heard laughter that reminded him of a life he threw away. He did not run from it anymore. He let it pass through him, slow and heavy like weather. One afternoon, while on break, Marcus overheard coworkers talking about a news story. They spoke about a woman who had taken over a corrupt system and changed it. About cleanup projects and community repair, about leadership with patience. Marcus knew who they meant. He did not speak, he listened. There was no bitterness this time. Only a quiet acceptance that the world had moved on, and that was how it should be. Back in New York, the environmental review reached its conclusion. The damage was real but manageable. Alina's early action reduced penalties and, more importantly, rebuilt trust. The court acknowledged the effort. The communities affected began to heal. Alina visited one of the restored sites personally. She walked the land with local leaders. She bent down and touched the soil. It was rich again, alive. She smiled softly. This, more than any award, felt like success. At the Silas Vance Center, construction continued. New spaces opened, research expanded. Students visited weekly. Alina watched young people walk through halls once filled with fear and pressure. Now they were filled with curiosity. She felt proud but not triumphant. Pride, she had learned, was best held gently. One evening, as the sun set behind the city, Alina stood on the rooftop garden alone. The plants rustled in the breeze. The lights below flickered on one by one. She thought about how far she had come. About the woman who once sat quietly signing papers, believing she was losing everything. She almost laughed at the memory. She had not lost herself. She had found herself. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A message from her legal team, short, direct. It informed her that one final matter remained unresolved. A minor issue, they said, but it involved Marcus Sterling. Alina stared at the screen for a long moment. She felt no fear. No anger, only curiosity. She had not heard his name in a long time. She put the phone away and looked out over the city again. The past had a way of returning, not to hurt but to test. She breathed in the cool air and reminded herself of her father's words. Respect the ground, tend it carefully. Whatever this final issue was, she would face it the same way she faced everything now, with patience, with honesty, with strength rooted deep. Far away, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed in his small rented room, holding a letter of his own. It bore an official seal. His hands shook slightly as he read. He did not know yet what it would mean. Only that his quiet life was about to be disturbed once more. And this time, there would be no running from what came next. The letter reached Alina on a calm morning when the city outside her window looked almost gentle. Sunlight moved slowly across the walls of her office. The plants near the glass leaned toward the light, healthy and green. Alina had just finished reviewing a proposal when her assistant placed a thin envelope on her desk. It did not look urgent, no bold stamps, no raised voices attached to it. Still, Alina felt a quiet tension settle in her chest before she even touched it. She opened the letter carefully and read it twice. The words were formal and controlled. They explained that a long-forgotten legal matter connected to an old Sterling Enterprises project had resurfaced. The project dated back many years, long before Alina took ownership of the land and the building. The issue involved environmental damage that had never been fully repaired. Because the land now belonged to the Vance Trust, responsibility for resolution had shifted to her. The letter did not accuse her of wrongdoing. It simply stated facts and next steps. Even so, the weight of it was real. Alina leaned back in her chair and let out a slow breath. She did not feel fear. She felt responsibility. This was the other side of success. Ownership did not only bring control and opportunity, it brought history. It brought mistakes made by others. Her father had warned her about this many times. Land remembers everything, he used to say. And someone always has to answer for it. She did not delay. Alina called her legal team and scheduled a meeting that same afternoon. She asked them to gather every record related to the site, not summaries, not conclusions, everything. When the team arrived, she listened more than she spoke. She asked clear questions. What was damaged? Who was affected? What could be done now? Her focus stayed on repair, not defense. That approach surprised some people. Others respected it immediately. Over the following weeks, Alina spent hours reading reports late into the night. Old documents told a familiar story: speed over care, profit over patience, warnings ignored, communities dismissed. She felt anger rise once, sharp and fast, but she let it pass. Anger was easy. Fixing things was harder. She approved funding for cleanup before any court order required it. She instructed her team to contact the affected communities directly, without press, without conditions. The first meetings were tense. People had learned not to trust powerful figures. Alina understood that. She sat in small rooms and listened to stories of polluted soil, sick crops, and broken promises. She did not interrupt. She did not defend herself. When she spoke simply. She acknowledged the harm. She explained what could be done now. Slowly the tension softened, not into forgiveness but into possibility. News outlets soon caught wind of the situation. Headlines appeared. Some praised her for acting quickly. Others accused her of trying to control the story. Alina did not chase approval. She continued the work. She stood before cameras when needed and spoke plainly. She accepted criticism without anger. People noticed the difference. Trust did not return overnight, but it began to grow. At home, Alina's life remained steady. Mornings started early. She made breakfast for her son and listened to his stories about school. She walked him to the bus when her schedule allowed. Those walks mattered to her. They reminded her that leadership did not begin in boardrooms. It began in presence. Julian supported her quietly. He asked how she was holding up. He did not push. He knew when silence was better. The estate upstate remained her anchor. On weekends, she returned there when she could. She walked the land. She checked the orchards. She knelt in the dirt and felt it between her fingers. The soil was rich, alive. Her father's legacy lived there, not in money but in care. She often spoke to him in her thoughts, asking if she was doing enough. The wind through the trees always seemed to answer. Far away, Marcus lived a very different rhythm. His life after release was small and quiet. He worked long hours at a warehouse, fixing broken equipment and cleaning spaces no one else wanted to handle. The work was physical, honest. His body ached at night, but the pain felt earned. The people around him knew nothing about his past. To them, he was just Marcus, a man who showed up and did his job. At first, the simplicity felt like punishment. Later, it became grounding. Marcus no longer woke up thinking about markets or deals. He woke up thinking about tasks, about doing one thing well at a time. Some days, regret hit him hard. It came when he saw reflections of tall buildings or passed small gardens growing behind modest homes. He did not run from the feeling anymore. He sat with it. He accepted it. One afternoon during a break, Marcus heard coworkers talking about a company that was cleaning up old damage instead of hiding it. They spoke with respect. They mentioned Alina's name. Marcus did not speak. He listened. There was no bitterness in him now, only a quiet understanding. She was doing exactly what he never could. She was repairing instead of escaping. Back in New York, the environmental review reached its final stage. Independent inspectors confirmed that cleanup efforts were effective. Penalties were reduced. More importantly, trust had begun to return. Alina visited one of the restored sites herself. She walked slowly across the land, listening to local leaders describe changes they could already see. Plants returning, water clearing, children playing where they once could not. Alina bent down and pressed her hand to the soil. It was cool and alive. She felt a deep sense of peace. The Silas Vance Center continued to grow. New programs launched. Researchers worked alongside students. The building no longer felt like a monument to power. It felt like a place of learning. Alina often watched people walk through the lobby, their faces relaxed. She remembered how fear once filled those same halls. That memory kept her humble. One evening, Alina stood alone on the rooftop garden as the city lights came alive below her. The plants moved gently in the breeze. She thought about how close she once came to losing herself. About the woman who signed divorce papers believing she was walking away with nothing. She smiled softly at the memory. She had not been buried, she had been planted. Her phone buzzed quietly. A message from her legal team appeared. It explained that one final issue remained unresolved. Minor, they said, but it involved Marcus Sterling. Alina stared at the screen for a long moment. She felt no fear, no anger, only calm curiosity. The past, she knew, did not return to punish. The morning Alina decided to respond was quiet and clear. The city below her window moved with its usual rhythm, unaware that anything personal was unfolding high above it. She stood by the glass for a long moment, holding a warm cup of tea, watching people cross streets and cars pause at lights. Life continued always. That simple truth had carried her through every loss and every change. When she finally returned to her desk, she opened the file that mentioned Marcus Sterling and read it one last time. The matter was simple on paper. Marcus had filed a request through legal aid, asking for a hearing related to the final environmental settlement. His name appeared only once in the document. He claimed no ownership. He asked for no money. He requested permission to testify about decisions made during his leadership, to accept responsibility formally, and to close the record. It was not required. The case could proceed without him. The choice to allow his statement rested entirely with Alina. She sat still for several minutes after finishing the page. Her thoughts did not race. They moved slowly, carefully. She thought of the man Marcus had been. Loud, certain, cruel without noticing it. She thought of the man he had become, or at least the fragments he had heard. Quiet, reduced, human, the difference did not bring her joy, it brought clarity. Alina approved the request. The hearing was scheduled for a small courtroom, nothing like the one that had once changed everything. No cameras waited outside, no reporters crowded the steps. It was a procedural matter. Still, Alina arrived early. She wore a simple suit. Her hair was tied back. She carried no folder. She did not need one. She already knew what she would say if anything needed to be said at all. Marcus arrived escorted by a legal aide. He looked older, thinner. His posture was no longer rigid with pride. He wore a plain jacket and held his hands together tightly as he sat. He did not look at Alina at first. When he finally did, his eyes widened slightly, then softened. There was no anger in them, only recognition. The judge entered, the proceedings began, facts were reviewed, reports were summarized, cleanup efforts were acknowledged. Alina listened quietly. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, the room felt still. He stood slowly. His hands shook for a moment, then steadied. He cleared his throat. He did not make excuses. He did not blame advisors or pressure. He spoke plainly. He admitted that during his leadership he ignored warnings. He admitted he chose speed over care. He admitted he dismissed people who tried to slow him down. His voice did not rise. It did not break. He spoke like a man finally telling the truth without needing it to change anything. When he finished, he turned slightly toward Alina. He did not address her directly. He did not ask forgiveness. He simply said he was sorry for the harm that could not be undone. Then he sat down. The judge thanked him. The record was noted. The matter closed. It was over. Outside the courtroom, Marcus stood near the exit, unsure of what to do next. Alina walked past him, then stopped. She turned. For a moment, neither spoke. The space between them felt wide but no longer sharp. "I didn't do this for you," Alina said calmly. "I know," Marcus replied. "I did it for the ground," she added. He nodded. "I know that too." They stood in silence. Then Alina spoke once more. "Take care of yourself," she said. Marcus swallowed and nodded again. "You too." They walked away in opposite directions. There was no drama, no final words, just closure. Weeks passed. The season changed. Leaves turned gold and red. At the Silas Vance Center, preparations began for the annual Sustainability Gala. Students decorated halls with plants and recycled art. Researchers prepared presentations. The building felt alive, not with ambition but with purpose. On the evening of the event, the city buzzed with energy. Alina arrived early, walking through the lobby as guests gathered. She greeted people by name. She listened. She laughed. Julian stood nearby, watching her with quiet pride. Their son ran through the rooftop garden earlier that day, chasing leaves and asking endless questions. Alina smiled at the memory. Later that night, Alina stepped outside onto the rooftop alone. The air was crisp. The city lights stretched endlessly. She rested her hands on the railing and breathed deeply. She thought of her father. Of his quiet strength. Of the lessons he planted long before she understood them. She remembered the day Marcus laughed while signing the divorce papers, the way he thought he was ending her story, the way she felt small and unseen. That memory no longer hurt. It felt distant, like a seed buried long ago that had already grown into something strong. Far away in a small town with quiet streets, Marcus walked home from work. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the road. He carried a small bag of groceries. His steps were slow but steady. He passed a community garden near his apartment. Someone had planted winter greens. He paused, then knelt to pull a weed growing near the fence. No one asked him to, it just felt right. Life was simple now, not easy, but honest. He no longer chased views from the top. He paid attention to where he stood. Back at the estate upstate, Alina visited the orchard with her son the next morning. The trees were heavy with fruit. The air smelled sweet and sharp. Her son ran ahead, laughing, holding a small basket. Julian followed behind, careful and patient. Alina walked to the edge of the orchard where a small stone marked her father's resting place. She knelt and placed an apple on the ground. She rested her hand on the cool stone. "He thought he was burying me," she said softly. "He didn't know I was a seed." The wind moved through the trees. Leaves rustled gently. Alina stood and turned back